Today, we'll look at some remarkable new machines, brand new features, upgrades and more that will change Satisfactory forever. Everything from a Somersloop power generator, Mercer sphere item teleportation portal, yes, that is completely legit by the way, brand new architecture and even unmissable quality of life changes. If you somehow weren't excited about update 1 before today's video, this will most certainly change your mind. Massive shout out to everyone that has subscribed to the channel in the last 24 hours. Again, a massive thank you to all of you lot. This video will be divided into 4 different sections. So smash that like button on your way in and let's begin. Starting with Mercer spheres. Mercer sphere only has one use in Satisfactory 1.0, and that is to create something called a dimensional depot. Essentially, think about this like storage that can be placed anywhere and teleported straight to you. Okay, that sounds quite confusing. Let me elaborate. Let's say that you are somewhere in the Dune Desert. However, your plastic factory is somewhere over here, and you have run out of plastic. Rather than running or flying or using a hypercannon to get from point A to point B, you can place down one of these dimensional depots over here, which has all the plastic going in, and then it will go straight to your inventory over in the Dune Desert. No running, no transport, nothing. This one point in itself is game changing, but again, there's so many other things that we'll be talking about in today's video that also will be changing the way Satisfactory flows, which is very exciting for brand new players, and also for veterans as well. And yes, you can have these dimensional depots all over the world, no matter where you are, it will go straight to your storage, but there's a catch, obviously, because if there wasn't a catch, this would be completely overpowered. Firstly, there is limited space for every item in the dimensional depot. Here we can see we've got 300 encased industrial beams, 600 plastic, 300 S.A.M fluctuator, which we'll definitely talk about a bit later on, etc, etc. So you can't just hold 20,000 plastic or 20,000 quartz crystals, because that would be extremely overpowered. Instead, there is a limit, and it actually gets nerfed a bit further than just that. In the footage you are currently seeing, we can see the plastic being taken out of the dimensional depot and added into the inventory. But pay attention to this. Look at how slowly this fills up. We only got 2 plastic there in the space of about 4 seconds. So this will take ages to actually fill up. It is not instant. We also have another example with this involving the screws. Here we can see Buster Snut connect the screws into the dimensional depot, and we can see it's already starting to build up. We have an uploading speed, we have a stockpile, which is actually really cool, and I've also got the depot upload rate per minute. Here we can see that 240 screws are going into this thing per minute, but if this belt is a 270 belt, which it looks like it is, eventually you can see that the items are eventually stacking up here, which you don't really want, but it's also nice to see that the stockpile does go up rather quickly as well. So pay attention to this most importantly, then pay attention to this, then see how many items you've actually got in this thing. But there's a lot of key information here that players might miss out on. Do not miss out on this information, because it will screw you up. I didn't say screw because there's screws on the screen, no pun intended, I promise. Okay, maybe that was a pun, but in my defense, it's currently like 3:30 in the morning, so I think I can give myself an excuse to make some terrible puns in today's video. If you're trying to upload items into your dimensional depot, but you feel like it's taking ages to upload, well, you can actually change that. And this requires the S.A.M, and yes, I will be talking a bit more about this later on, but here we can see a couple of these upgrades, where we need Mercer spheres, and this brand new item called a S.A.M fluctuator, which again we'll talk about in just a wee minute. But here, for example, it says, the dimensional depot upload speeds 25% increase, which is huge. Like that's actually a pretty massive increase. So definitely do get yourself a couple of these upgrades if you want the speeds to increase. There you go, another 12.5%. It is quite costly. Look at this, 13 Mercer spheres. But this is what you'll be using your Mercer spheres for. And it doesn't quite end there just yet in regards to the dimensional depots. Here we can see Buster Snut trying to place down an assembler, but he hasn't got the resources. Yet, he's still able to place it down. And that is because, as we rewind here very quickly, we can see that he actually uses some rotors and some wire from the dimensional depot. So it goes straight into your inventory if you're trying to place something down and you haven't got enough resources, which is absolutely amazing how it can do that. And if we have a look over here, you can actually see it fill up. And this is, of course, the dimensional depot just filling up as the player is placing down the item, which is actually really awesome to see. If you don't want this feature, don't worry, you can just turn it off. Click here where it says take from inventory before depot. So let's say you have 500 concrete in your inventory and 500 concrete in the depot. Rather than it taking from the depot first, it goes into your inventory. If you're then out of concrete in your inventory, it then goes back to the depot. I feel like I've said the word depot 4,000 times today, but that should be everything with the Mercer spheres covered. I will have a full video when 1.0 comes out, going fully in depth with the dimensional depots a little bit more. So if you'd like a tutorial on how to use this, how to place it down, how much it's going to cost, how efficient it is, then make sure you guys do stick around for that tutorial when 1.0 drops. Moving on. I've already kind of teased this segment, but let's talk about S.A.M ore. And the very first thing to clear up is that it's no longer called S.A.M ore, it's just called S.A.M, and S.A.M now stands for Strange Alien Matter. So congrats at home if you were able to guess that. I know a few people in my streams and my live chats did guess that correct, so thumbs up for you lot. Some key takeaways that we got from this introduction to the Strange Alien Matter is that, luckily, this item is no longer limited. As of before 1.0, if you were to try and collect the Strange Alien Matter from the ground, you could only get like 100 of it, and then it would just stop collecting it. You could no longer get any unless you reloaded the save. Now, it doesn't do that. You can collect as much as the resource node allows you to collect, just like iron, just like limestone, just like copper, just like every other raw resource in the game. And the second thing, which I did kind of say they were going to change, and I said this about 2 months ago, they are adding more S.A.M nodes. So that's pretty cool. This was something else that was highly debated in the Satisfactory community, and again, they are adding more nodes. If you are running out of S.A.M, don't worry. There's a few nodes scattered around the map which you couldn't have found before. So keep an eye out for them when you're exploring the brand new planet. Another key takeaway that we got is that S.A.M is very important. So the S.A.M resource creates something called reanimated S.A.M. This is made simply just from S.A.M in the constructor. We've seen this now in a number of trailers, so this isn't anything new from today, but it's still important to note, especially considering this block then goes into the manufacturer combined with wire and steel pipes to create something called S.A.M Fluctuas, which is an item we were just talking about in regards to the Mercer sphere. So that's pretty cool. That is something that I don't think they've actually shown before, so hey, that's kind of awesome. So do you guys remember this brand new alien technology tree? Well, you actually have to use S.A.M and then combine it with either Somersloop or Mercer spheres to then actually unlock parts of that tree. So S.A.M again does play a vital role in regards to that MAM tree, which again is a brand new technology tree you can now get in the MAM. And I think that just about covers everything to do with Strange Alien Matter. So now let's move on to something which is a bit more complicated to understand, but equally, if not even cooler than S.A.M, and that is Somersloop. So the Somersloop has a couple of different purposes. The first of which is used to craft something called a power augmenter, which is essentially this badass machine that you've seen in every Satisfactory video in the last 48 hours. Not only does it look badass, but it also acts badass as well. When you combine the Somersloop inside of this machine, which I believe you have to use a Somersloop to create this machine, you then get 500 megawatts of power for free. Which sounds pretty cool, but let's break it down a little bit. 500 megawatts is the equivalent of 16.7 biomass burners or 6.7 coal generators, which isn't really that bad. I suppose it's free power, so who can actually complain about that? Someone's going to definitely complain about that, I can guarantee it. The luxuries don't stop there. When you place down one of these things, it actually generates plus 10% power in your entire grid, which is connected to this machine. This is probably the easiest way for me to explain it. Let's say you currently have 1000 megawatts of power on your current grid, and then you place down one of these new machines, which generates an extra 500 megawatts of power, and an additional 10%. It's not 10% combining these, it's only 10% of this, and 10% of 1000 is, you've guessed it, 100 megawatts. You then combine all of this together, and you've got yourself 1600 megawatts. However, if you were to place down more of these machines, which again is called the power augmenter, you can't just suddenly generate double this it's still double this plus this. So these two get added together, but it doesn't include the previous power augmenter from before. I know this sounds a little bit complicated, but it gets a lot easier when you get a chance to play the game and experiment with this feature yourself. So don't be too concerned about this. All that you need to know is there's a brand new machine called the power augmenter. It generates 500 megawatts of power instantly without you doing anything, and then it gives you an additional 10% power on your current grid. The more power you've got in your grid, the more extra power this thing gives you. And you can place down a lot of these things, which is great, but do remember, with both the Somersloop and the Mercer sphere, these two items are limited. You can't just place down 1,000 of these machines, or 1,000 of the dimensional depots. There is a limit to how much you can place down. Also, a really fun feature is that you can actually check how much extra power you are producing on your grid just by going into the settings of this machine. Again, super simple, life changer, I love it. People are going to think this is actually like a sponsored channel, the amount of times I've praised this game, but it's good, what can I say, damn. So that sounds great, but there is actually a second use for this machine, and that is an alien production amplification, which sounds very confusing, but it's actually, again, really easy to explain. Let's take this iron ingot recipe for an example. We're using 30 iron ore to create 30 iron ingots. We still have our 3 slots for the power shards, but we've also got a brand new shot for the Somersloop to create an output multiplier, which is brand new, and this thing has its pros and its cons. But let's start with the pros, because this is generally awesome. Again, 30 iron ore into 30 iron ingots. We can now see it's 30 iron ore into 60 iron ingots. So this thing right here outputs a 2 times multiplier for this thing. So you're still consuming the same resources, but you're getting double the items produced, which is fantastic. But let's talk about the cons, and that involves this, the power used. Right now, for the basic recipe, it's only 4 megawatts. You add the Somersloop, and that shoots up to 16 megawatts, quadrupling the power, which sounds bad, but it doesn't even come close to our next example. And that is computers. Again, we've got a double output multiplier here, so we're consuming the same resources, but rather than making 4 computers, we're making 8. But have a quick look at the power consumption. Yes, that is 409.5 megawatts. Just for creating 8 computers. This is wild. Also, a quick side note, we can now see that a couple of these images have actually changed. Quartz crystals has changed. We can see that these are the new diamond resource as well, which looks incredible. We've got the fixite ingots, which of course is brand new. We've got the dark matter crystal, which again is really nice. We've also got the time crystal, which again is brand new. We've got the fixite trigons, but we've also got a couple new things over here, which do not worry, we will talk about this. So essentially, depending on what item you're making, you might have to consume a lot more power than what you were consuming before, if you indeed decide to use the Somersloop. It's also important to note that the more complicated an item is to make, for example computers, it requires more Somersloop. So from that iron ore to iron ingot recipe, it was 1 Somersloop. From the computer recipe, it was 4. And again, we haven't got a lot of Somersloops in the game, so use these very, very wisely. The last thing you want to do is use 40 of these Somersloops for things like this, and then realizing, oh, I haven't got enough Somersloops to make extra production in this item, or I haven't got enough Somersloops to add this much power to my grid. So again, do take that into consideration before you just splash out all your Somersloop on some useless things, like making double the amount of iron ingots. Please don't do that, and if you do that, please don't send it to me on any platform, because I will block you. Wow, that was really harsh, but I'm being serious. So that's everything to do with Somersloop, Mercer spheres, and S.A.M. But the next category, I would argue, is the biggest because of how much content we have got revealed to us. And I think the best place to start is with the 2, yes, not 1, but 2 brand new fuel liquids coming into the game. You might think, if you already play the game, that creating turbo fuel is rather tedious and quite difficult, because you have to combine one thing with something else, which combines with something else, which combines with something else, and that's a liquid, so that's difficult to transport, etc, etc. Well, things have just gotten crazier. And that leads us to rocket fuel. Rocket fuel is a brand new fuel type coming into Satisfactory. It combines turbo fuel with nitric acid. To To be fair, the actual recipe for nitric acid isn't really that bad. You just need nitrogen gas, which there isn't a lot of, but I think you can actually make more of it with the converter in 1.0. Water, which there's an abundance of it, and iron plates, which again isn't really that difficult to make. So creating nitric acid shouldn't necessarily be an issue. And this is produced in the blender, where as a byproduct you actually get something called compacted coal, which you can use for quite a few different things. So that's pretty cool in case you do need extra coal for some stuff. Rocket fuel has a burn rate of 4.167 cubic meters inside the fuel generator, which sounds good, but it's quite difficult to make. I'd still recommend making it for a reason I'll explain shortly. The second reason as to why the rocket fuel is actually very, very good is because you can also put it into vehicles as well. Not to mention, you can also add it into the jetpack, and when you do add it into the jetpack, you get insane verticality. Just take a look at this clip. You go shooting miles into the sky, which is great. The only issue is that it does burn quite quickly. So let's assess the pros and cons. The pros: it produces compact coal as a byproduct, which is great, and that's produced from the blender. Also, the jetpack verticality is great. But some of the cons: it burns very quick in the jetpack. Also, in regards of burn rate in the fuel generator, it's not really that much better than the turbo fuel, and of course it's an extra step, which is extra hassle, and that's extra power consumed. Think about it, you've got to place down all these blenders, you then have to collect extra nitric acid, which is extra water generators, so it is definitely a bit of a hassle to do all of that. I would still recommend making it, and that's because of our second fuel type, which is called ionized fuel. Ionized fuel is a combination of rocket fuel, the thing we just talked about, and synthetic power shards. Yeah, synthetic power shards and fuel combining together, but hear me out on why I think this is actually really, really good. Not only does this item produce yet more compacted coal, but it has a burn rate of 3 cubic meters per minute. This is 4 times better than regular fuel in Satisfactory, and it's by far, from what I can see at least, the best thing to burn in the fuel generators in Satisfactory 1.0. I highly recommend making this, especially since power consumption is going to be massively on the rise in 1.0. So unfortunately, even though you can still add this item to a lot of different vehicles in the game, you don't get as much verticality when it comes to the jetpack. So of course, if you are just going for verticality in the jetpack, stick to rocket fuel, but for every other reason, I recommend just converting it into ionized fuel. So the pros for this thing is that it makes compact coal. Also, the burn rate is the best in the game when it comes to fuel. Cons is that it's very costly to make. Remember, the synthetic power shards aren't cheap. That in itself requires tons and tons and tons of items in the game to make. Then you also have to make turbo fuel, and then you have to make the rocket fuel into the game as well. It's a bit confusing to make, but if you're really trying to go for a lot of power in the game, I would recommend it. When 1.0 comes out, I'll be making a separate video comparing every single fuel type in Satisfactory, so you can make the decision yourself what you want to go with, rather than me telling you to go with this or to go with that or this is better than that. I'll leave it up to you to make your own verdict and your own conclusion, and that will be a video I'll make again when 1.0 comes out in just a few days from now, so stay tuned for that. Very quickly, I'd like to talk about drones, and this actually does kind of relate to our previous point. As of right now, before 1.0 coming out, drones only uses batteries. But that's changing in 1.0. Now, rather than drones just using batteries, it can use almost any other fuel type in the game, which most likely does include the rocket fuel and the ionized fuel. However, it's not quite that simple. Depending on what fuel type you use, it makes the drone go either fast or slow. So if you use regular fuel in the game, like just regular basic fuel, it's going to go slower than if you were to use ionized fuel. So that was a quick 3-second update about drones. Next thing I would like to bring up is some information about guidelines and a conveyor belt overhaul, which sounds pretty exciting. That's because it is. Firstly, you no longer need to aim at a production building's inputs or outputs when you're trying to connect a conveyor belt. All you have to do is just look at the building, and it snaps to it automatically. It automatically connects. You don't have to fiddle with anything, it just snaps onto it, which is Great. Secondly, we need to take a quick look at these guidelines because I think they are incredible, especially for you new players out there. So this constructor needs to line up with this constructor, but right now we can see a blue line, which means it's aligned with each other, but it doesn't easily connect. All you have to do is rotate it until you see this, which is like a checkered pattern line. The blue indicates an output and the orange indicates an input. And when you see the line like this, it means that an output is going directly in a straight line into the input. And when you see this, it means that it's going from an input into an input, which of course you can't do anything with, unless of course you're having a splitter placed down there. So this is still quite an important thing to keep an eye out for. Same thing here with the mergers. We can see the output of the merger and the input of the merger lines up, so we get that beautiful new pattern. Same thing here. And here we can also see what happens again with an input and an input. There is a straight orange line. It means that there is not an output going into an input. So you might be down on the ground, not getting this much of a vertical view, unable to see what's happening. But you can see out of the corner of your eye, okay, that's one big orange line, which means I need to change something. So that's actually a really cool feature to have in the game. I love this. It's such a basic change, I think. I mean, well, I'm not a game dev, so I don't know if it was easy to code or not, but from a player's point of view, this seems like a nice change, and something which I probably won't be able to live without now. Like I mentioned, there's also been a conveyor belt overhaul, and again, if you're a new player or a veteran player, you're going to love this. Here we are trying to get our iron ingots to go into our constructor, and if we were to build a regular conveyor belt right now, this is what we get. But as you can see, there is a brand new build mode. So what we can now do is very simply create an angle so it doesn't, overflow anything, it doesn't get in the way. It creates a perfect bend, which is going to save you so much time. Here's another clip that does show this thing in action as well, which again is dope. And I actually want to pause it on this clip, because this conveyor belt right here, which again, remember, was placed down in the click of a button, seems absolutely massive. It is about 5.5 tiles long. So maybe they've increased the size of the conveyor belt so you can place down, but either way, again, look how simple this is and how nice it looks. Again, great feature for new players and old players alike. We've also got a cheeky update to the locomotive tracks here as well. All you have to do in this situation is press the control button, because right now, this is without control, and this is with control pressed. It snaps into a straight line, which again can be very useful. Just in case it does go slightly left or slightly right from where you want it to go, you can now control where it goes by pressing control, and it will be guaranteed a straight line, which again is it's awesome. You guys know I'm going to like it, so yeah. The last guideline change is to do with chainsaws, which was probably the last thing I thought was ever going to get an update, and I kind of knew people wouldn't be that interested in this, even though it's still kind of cool. But let me explain why this is technically quite a big deal, especially for players out there that try and focus on nice, neat projects that incorporate vegetation into their builds. Let me show you. There's two modes that you can select for the chainsaw. There's area, which is what we had before, and now there is single. So if you just want to destroy this tree, or just want to destroy this plant, or these leaves, you can now do that with a single swoop, rather than destroying absolutely everything in this area with this setting. And the reason as to why I say this is important is because if you've got 5 trees next to each other, which you think look quite nice, adds a bit of life, a bit of vegetation, a bit of foliage into your builds, but then there's that one tree that you just don't like the look of, or it is a leaf that gets in the way, you can select the single mode and get rid of it. Great. Also a nice way if you're just trying to collect wood, you can now just hunt the trees rather than trying to get leaves or flower petals and things like that. So again, really cool. Moving on now, we have one of my favorite segments, and that is brand new architecture. We've known for a while that there are some brand new things coming into the game in regards of architecture, because we've seen it being teased to us for about the last 7 weeks. But now we get a full understanding of what exactly we're actually getting. And here we can see everything right here. We've got a couple new fences, stairs, barriers, windows, and I think 1 or 2 wall items as well. Let's start with the 2 fences. We've got this gated fence. We've also got this gated fence with a metal sheet thing in the middle. These 2 fences are very nice, and I'll most certainly be using them throughout my builds. Not really too much to say about this, it's a fence, but I think the design of them has been excellently done. Second of all, we have stairs. I love stairs, it's great that we have this. The question is though, can we also get concrete stairs and coated concrete stairs as well as just this? Because that would be quite nice, obviously. The third thing to talk about is the barriers. We can see we've got two different forms of barriers confirmed. We've got this type of barrier, which seems quite, not small, but like lower down. And then we have this barrier, and this appears to be half a foundation tall, whereas this appears to be 1/4 foundation tall. So those appear to be the two size differences there. And this again appears to be half a foundation tall as well, which is again perfect. Moving on, we've got a couple new glass types. We've got this glass type, which again is rather simple, but it's perfect for what it is. And then we have this hexagon styled glass as well, which does remind me a bit of this, but I do quite like this as well. I will most likely be using this throughout my builds. What I was actually planning on doing is creating like a hexagon building. So using hexagon glass on a hexagon building, it would go perfectly, I feel like. So, and I think lastly, we have to talk about this piece up here. This looks like some sort of like metallic wall, which looks absolutely great. It does slope a little bit down here, but I actually quite like that design, and I generally feel that's quite nice. But this is not the only metallic thing here, and that is because we now have buildable metallic skins. And the best part is, I think they might be free to make, hopefully. And here we can see our 5 metallic skins so far, including something which a few of you might have already spotted, which I'll definitely talk about in just a second. Here, I believe this is chrome metallic skin. Here we've got copper. This one I believe is unpainted. We then have carbon steel, and then caterium. And a few of you might have seen, yes, this is the brand new biomass burner in Satisfactory 1.0. You can now connect it using a conveyor belt, finally! Oh my days, this has been a dream of mine for the last, I think, 3 years, but now it's official. Let's freaking go. But yeah, I think all these skins are absolutely solid. Like I mentioned in my video yesterday, I do think all of these will look even better when you combine it with light, like sign lightage, for example. I think the amount of beautification you can create using these skins would be amazing. But you might be wondering, why do I think that this is free? Well, let me show you. When the player hovers over all of these brand new finishes, there's no cost over here. Normally, if something did cost a bit of money, it would say it's going to cost you 10 iron plates, or it's going to cost you steel, or whatnot. But this doesn't appear to cost you anything. So you do automatically get it in the customizer? Well, I'm guessing you do have to buy these in the awesome shop for some tickets and probably some other stuff as well. Like, for example, for copper, you might have to spend 1,000 copper ingots and some tickets to get this. For caterium, the same sort of thing. Steel, the same thing. For chrome, I don't know what you can buy this with. Maybe aluminium? Not quite sure about that. Unpainted, I'm not sure either. But I guess we'll find out soon enough. And to the final thing I would like to mention in today's video, because I realized this has dragged on, but I didn't want to rush it. I wanted to take my time and give you guys all the information. The final thing is blueprints Mark II. That is right, you can now have 5x5 blueprints rather than a regular 4x4. A quick thing to note with this though, is that if you create something on the Mark I blueprint, you can't just edit it on the Mark II blueprint. You have to copy and paste it over and then save it again. So it's like 2 different save files. Think about it like 2 different machines, or 2 different files, 2 different everything essentially. So if you were editing something on Mark I, you can't just re-edit it on Mark II. You can very simply just copy and paste it over to the Mark II, and then just continue doing whatever it is that you want to do, and then just save it there instead. So I do recommend when you do unlock the Mark II blueprint, you just use that instead. Don't go back to the Mark I, it will make things a bit more confusing. That's just my tips and tricks though, and that's what I'll be doing at least. Unless there's something wrong with that idea, which I don't think there should be. Either way, that will just about do it for today. But of course, a massive thank you to Lo, Chaos Rising, Jan Matejko, and Meow Meow for all becoming members on the channel. If you too would like to become a member, you get access to exclusive badges, emotes, rewards, channel benefits, and a lot more. Click the membership link in the description below to join for £2.99 per month. It is the best way to support my work here on the channel. And that will just about do it for today's video, so click there or here to see more of my content, and subscribe if Satisfactory is the game for you. Have an amazing rest of your day, and remember, Godspeed.